Okay, that was a bit of an extreme reaction there, but, guys, I don't know about this season. At the end of the day, Happiness Charge is still a season of Precure, under the creative control of more or less the same people who've been making it for years, so it naturally hits some baseline level of quality, but beyond that, this season had a bit of an identity crisis. The core cast struggled to distinguish themselves, and structurally this season didn't know whether it wanted to be a classic Precure or another Doki Doki. At least the action was good. Yeah, honestly, even after having written this entire video, I'm still a bit baffled, so let's just try to power through this, shall we? Happiness Charge features the weakest core cast of any Precure season thus far. While I wouldn't say they're poorly written, they are lacking in depth. They hardly grow, and they do little to distinguish themselves from past Precure protagonists. The heart and soul of every season of Precure is the core cast. The sheer number of episodes in every season means you spend a lot of time with the characters, really getting to know and care about them, so that when the action rolls around, you're really invested in seeing them prevail. Hell, ideally, you're just invested in seeing them succeed in general, whether it be in magic fights or in real life. If a season of Precure is missing that core part of the experience, well, that's a gap that just can't be filled, regardless of how well executed any other part of the season is. Let's look at each of them in turn, see if we can glean anything remotely nuanced from any of them. This season's enthusiastic pink-haired pro-tag is Megumi. Like her predecessors, she's friendly and loves helping others, but she's more mellow and down-to-earth. That could have made her more relatable than her past season counterparts, but in actuality, by toning down the hyperactivity that characterizes many Precure protagonists, this season accidentally turned its protagonists into, well, a boring one. Every facet of her personality has been portrayed with more care in past leads. Nozomi and Miyuki were more endearing in their goofballiness. Love better empathized with her peers, and Mono was just as enthusiastic about helping others, but learned lessons about not overexerting or overextending. Megumi? She's a goof, but not excessively so. Her cure form is named for love, but she fails to understand, or even try to understand, the feelings of those most important to her until near the end. And even then, I'm not sure she really learned. And while she's enthusiastic about helping others, she never learns when to stop. She's occasionally warned to rein it in, sometimes unnecessarily so. But to my frustration, when it really matters, she utterly fails to learn that lesson. Let's elaborate on that bit by examining episode 33. Megumi happens to stumble upon this rocket scientist and is like, "Oh, let me help." Throughout the episode, she repeatedly tries and fails to help this girl because she has zero knowledge about engineering or rocket science or literally any knowledge that would be helpful in this scenario. She's more of a hindrance to this girl than anything, so this would be the perfect time for her to learn the lesson that she can't help everyone with anything. Sometimes people will know more about something than you, and in those cases, it's fine to let them do their thing. Don't overexert yourself, basically. So, the end of the episode rolls around, and what lesson does Megumi say she learned? But that's not what the episode was about at all. Are you kidding me? Don't get me wrong. That, in and of itself, is not a bad thing for her to learn, but it just comes out of nowhere and does not reflect what the episode was building toward. Worse, Megumi failing to learn this lesson isn't a plot point that's brought up later. No, this lesson that was built up over several episodes is just dropped and never resolved, and it's like, Well, what was the point of all that if it's not going to come to anything? This is one of several story beats that are unceremoniously dropped throughout the season, and I'll make note of others when we come to them. Alright, so Megumi's kind of a dud pro tag. What about her bestie, Hime? She's not much better. She's a small ball of energy, much like Erika from Heartcatch, but unlike Erika, who was an endearing brat, Hime is just a brat. Take her first meeting with Megumi, for instance. The first thing Hime does is criticize Megumi for dressing practically instead of fashionably. I repeat, the first thing Hime does is criticize Megumi. A shitty thing to do, no matter the intent. It does not matter that Hime is coming from a place of earnest passion. Forcibly criticizing someone who never asked for nor deserved it is just rude, and Hime never apologizes or learns from that experience. Hime being bullheaded and having a narrow perspective would be fine if she grew out of it by learning from her mistakes, but she rarely does, which is quite frustrating. Hime almost had one distinct story beat that made her stand out from Erika. Almost. Sorry to say, this is another dropped story beat. Hime had one central conflict at her core that at times brought out the worst in her, causing her to lash out at her friends and withdraw into herself. The mental anguish she goes through as a result is the most human part of her. This conflict is, or so we're told at first, that she was the one who unleashed the evil that now plagues the world, the evil that already destroyed hers. This secret eats her up inside. On the one hand, she's fighting to save the world and undo the damage she did alongside her friends that she values more than anything. On the other, she fears that if her secret gets out, her friends will leave her, dooming the world and leaving her in despair. A bit paranoid, sure, but when guilt that huge wells inside you for so long, you're bound to go a little nuts, desperate for things to stay the way they are. Eventually, the secret gets out, and naturally some drama occurs, but then they backpedal. Instead of her friends having to seriously contend with the possibility that their friend might have done a bad, instead of Hime having to live with and learn from her mistakes, as it turns out, it wasn't really her fault. She was just sort of tricked into it, so she's not really at fault and she has nothing to feel guilty about. Everything's fine. It's fine. She's fine. Everything's fine. Nothing wrong here. No moral dilemmas to worry about or anything. It's fine. She's fine. I take issue with this because of the missed potential. By absolving Hime of any wrongdoing or guilt, this season dodges having to explore any character-centric ramifications of the original mistake. Hime's mistake could have been the facilitator of group conflict and personal growth. Hime could have been motivated by that mistake to fix it, learning to live with the guilt and be stronger for it, because while we all make mistakes, those mistakes don't have to define us. We can learn from and be better than our worst selves, but instead, no! She never actually made a mistake of her own will. She didn't really do much wrong. She doesn't have to contend with any of that. She's fine. It's fine. Fuck! And she doesn't have much else going on besides. She almost has a distinct motivation driving her forward, which would be something, but then that motivation rarely actually factors into either the weekly slice-of-life stories or the larger narrative. Sad to say, just like Megumi, Hime has little to her. Also, just like Yuko. Yuko's the third main character, and she likes rice, and she can sing, I guess. That's about it. Honestly, now I'm feeling bad for calling Nao from Smile a flat character, and though that's technically still true, at least she had an identifiable personality and faced the occasional personal struggle and had relatable wants and desires. In comparison to Yuko, Nao's fucking nuanced. Yuko just... I hate doing this, just leaving a discussion of what should be an important facet of the show at there isn't anything to say, but honestly and truly, I can't comment on anything other than the fact that there's nothing to say. Like, it's weird how Yuko is utterly devoid of any defining characteristics or a unique personality. Even the worst characters in Precure usually have something about them that helps them stick out and seem like, fleshed out characters. But Yuko's an anomaly in that she has so little going on that I hesitate to compare her to Cardboard for fear of insulting Cardboard. Just, how does she even exist? Pivoting to a somewhat positive note, the only character who lacks anything I can bicker about is Iona Hikawa. the best character this season. While she's not terribly complex, she has the most well-defined personality of the lot and has a strong motivation that actually factors into her decisions and drives her forward. Maybe it's weird that being strongly motivated is the highest praise I can give a character this season, but I'll take what I can get. Iona wants to save her sister. She inherited her Precure powers from her defeated sister, who's now trapped by the baddies. Inspired by her sister's heroics, Iona wants to save her sister from the baddies and then stop the baddies so they can't hurt anyone else. A simple, understandable motivation, but it's one that works because it's the driving force behind high-stakes action and the catalyst for some all-too-brief drama. Having something to fight for makes the action scenes involving Iona much more gratifying because she's fighting for and risking something more substantial than just fending off the monster of the week or whatever. We're more invested in seeing her win because the possibility of her losing carries with it tangible and terrible consequences. She's also the central character of what is far and beyond the best episode this season, episode 32. It's got a rough opener, but once it gets into the heart of what it wants to explore, oh boy. This episode is great because it explores an as-of-yet unknown aspect of Iona's character via some unique directing, which provides some excellent visual storytelling and sets the episode apart visually and tonally from not just the rest of the season, but the rest of the series. On the narrative front, this episode's about Iona going on a date and pondering love. Up until now, Iona's been the stoic hero, focused on training and saving the world and whatnot, so this is new territory for her, and she genuinely doesn't know how to react to being asked out. This could have been handled very poorly. Indeed, from the outset I feared this would result in a drastic personality shift or other break in character to accommodate a forced romance. Thankfully, this was handled with some care. Iona stayed true to herself while recognizing that she may be developing new feelings, and ended with a tepid half-acceptance. She chooses to remain focused on the task at hand, to keep fighting for her sister and the world, but she also acknowledges that one day, once things have settled down, she just might be up for date 2. What really makes this episode stand out, though, is the directing. Scenes are blocked in such a way as to both look cool and visually reflect the character's emotions. Deliberate close-ups are used to accentuate important beats, like Iona here realizing something important about her date. And then there's the episode's colors, which first become more washed out, then darker and more high contrast as the situation and Iona's fears escalate. Together, these two factors, the coloring and shot composition, make for some of the most impactful imagery in the whole series. They set a melancholic tone and visually communicate Iona's struggles with figuring out her own emotions. It's stuff of beauty. Seriously, this episode is like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in the middle of a bunch of 5s and 6s. How did this even happen? Out of curiosity, I strolled on over to ANN and discovered that this episode was directed and storyboarded by one Shigeyasu Yamauchi, and that this is the only Precure-related thing he's ever done. Turns out Yamauchi is best known for directing Casshern Sins, so that explains some things. Oh no, I'm rambling to fill time because I'm honestly struggling to think of anything meaningful to say. This is what this has all come to. These characters, they're all fine, but aside from Iona, none of them stand out as being fully realized human beings. They're mostly just the boring versions of Precure characters that came before. Shit, even Iona's just Yuri, but less. I don't know. I don't know about any of this season. I don't even think this season knows for sure what it's going for. At least not for a good while. Coming fresh off the hotly contested Doki Doki, Happiness Charge represented a sort of return to form for Precure, at least for a while. Precure generally excels at balancing slice-of-life stories with Monster of the Week, but I feel like I've said something to that effect a million times over the course of these videos. Anyway, the usual structure for any episode of Precure was first half slice-of-life antics, second half monster brawl, and wrapping up any drama that may have occurred. That format more or less persists until the mid-season or end-season finale rolls around. Doki Doki, however, didn't do that. Instead, it attempted a more serialized structure in which stories and character beats unfolded over many episodes. Given the, shall we say, controversial nature of Doki Doki, Happiness Charge appears to backpedal from that and return to the more traditional form at first. But the influence of Doki Doki remains in some long-term story elements, so the end result is a season that's a compromise between the story-driven Doki Doki and the more laid-back format of most of the rest of the seasons. In particular, the first roughly 2/3 of Happiness Charge reflect the more classic style with hints of the narrative to come, while the last 10 episodes bring everything to a head in a huge finale, with pacing and story structure more akin to Doki Doki. Unfortunately, due to not committing to one structure or another, this season came off as a little unfocused, unsure of what it wanted to be. Those first 2/3 feel like a bunch of floundering, the season desperately trying to find its footing, its own identity. It does eventually do that with those last 10 or so episodes, but by then this season had spent so long without clear direction that it was hard to be invested in anything that was happening, no matter how much of an exciting ride that finale was. And believe me, it was quite the ride. Given the shaky foundation it was built on, it struggled to ever truly engage me. When I say this season wasn't quite sure what it wanted to be, I'm not just talking about that structure, I'm also referring to the several dropped plot lines. We've already been over a couple. Here's another. Every season has its magic MacGuffin merchandisable toys that are either just there or somewhat important to the story. This season's no exception. It's got a magic book and trading cards that the girls use to magically change clothes, woohoo. The in-universe explanation for this blatant toy marketing is that if they collect enough cards, they can have one wish granted. In episode 22, not even halfway through the season mind you, Iona is forced into a situation where she has to use up a wish to keep fighting. Progress reset, the expectation at that point was that they would keep collecting the cards and use another wish to help save the world. But then they don't. They keep collecting cards, but outside of the occasional conversation about wishes, the whole grant a wish thing is tossed aside and completely forgotten. I find this weird because the whole wish thing was built up as an integral part of this Precure group's whole thing, and to have it dropped without mention as to why betrays a lack of focus on the part of the narrative. Like, why bother with all the build-up if it wasn't going to continue to be important? At least make mention at some point why this thing is no longer a thing. So overall, the story and structure of this season was pretty muddled. It had its moments, but was hard to get invested in. Luckily, this season did have some other stuff going for it, namely its action. As the start of every episode love to tell you, oh my god, what's up with Nagisa's pose here? She's like, "Hey kids, what's happening?" The release of this season coincided with the 10th anniversary of the Precure franchise. Without insider knowledge, I cannot say for certain to what extent this affected the production of this season. What I will theorize is that this season was meant to be a celebration of the franchise, and as such they went all in on the spectacle. For one, we must consider that spectacular 10-episode finale. Most Precure finales take up for 5 episodes max, while this one accounts for a whole 5th of this season. There's a lull in the middle, but aside from that, the finale is episode after episode of intense and superbly crafted action beats. The insane amount of consistently well-animated fight scenes and breathtaking set pieces are delivered with such frequency and for so long that it's pretty incredible that this is just a TV anime produced on a yearly cycle by Toei of all studios. The final battle in particular contains some of the most well-choreographed hand-to-hand combat I've ever witnessed. All of this means that the excitement is constantly high and escalating for longer than it has any right to during this finale, and it, if anything, is this season's one standout feature that makes it worth watching. But it's not just the finale that contains the good things, this being Precure and the 10th anniversary spectacle season to boot. Exciting action is sprinkled throughout the entire season. I've already mentioned how awesome episode 32 was. Did I also mention that its action was excellent as well? And then, you know what, screw words, just look at some of this dope shit. And believe it or not, the spectacle this season doesn't just consist of action, there's also a lot of lively character animation that helps to keep things exciting and fun, and believe me, this animation does a lot of work. Hime would be pretty much nobody based on how she were written if the animators didn't go above and beyond with making her constantly expressive in a multitude of unique manners. Granted, a lot of the goofy facial expressions on display are pretty much curved right out of Heartcatch, and they worked better there due to the character designs being made to accommodate that expressiveness, but hey, I'll take what fun I can get this season. Speaking of Heartcatch, and we're getting into some behind-the-scenes stuff here, this season's got one more interesting connection to that one. Director Tatsuya Nagamine. Nagamine had previously earned his fame for directing Heartcatch, which was the first season he'd done. He was brought back to the series' director's chair for Happiness Charge, and I suspect that the 10th anniversary had something to do with that, but don't quote me. Like, hey, we've got our 10th anniversary coming up. Let's go all out and start by bringing back the guy who directed the most popular and best season of this show. Great idea on paper, but I fear that this season is evidence that Heartcatch, and indeed big art projects like this in general, was very much a team effort, because without other returning key staff from Heartcatch, Happiness Charge was only ever going to feel like a second-rate version of that season, and indeed that's exactly what happened. The most noticeable difference in staff is the head writer. Instead of Heartcatch's Takeshi Yamada, Happiness Charge was penned by longtime Precure scriptwriter Yoshimi Narita, who also did series comp for Yes 5 and GoGo. Given their work on Yes 5, we know that Narita has the chops to write endearing and relatable protagonists, so that quality being absent here is curious. I can't help but feel like Narita tried to emulate Yamada's eccentric tone that dominated Heartcatch while sidelighting their own strengths, but given everything we've discussed so far, all we ended up with was a pale imitation that was neither as fun as Heartcatch nor as endearing as Yes 5. Though I must make clear that this is all mere speculation, this is all nonetheless the distinct impression that I got. Another noticeable difference, at least to me, is the character designer. Heartcatch's Yoshihiko Umakoshi of Casshern Sin's fame did not return. Instead, character design duties were handled by Masayuki Sato, and this would be his first and last time doing so with Precure. I suppose this is all down to taste, but Sato's designs lack the personality imbued into Yoshihiko's. They don't as easily lend themselves to the expressiveness of Heartcatch's characters, but blessed did the animation team try. It's also worth taking a look at the various episode directors. Of the 14 credited this season on ANN, only 5 returned from Heartcatch. Between them and everything else, I think we can understand why this season suffered an identity crisis. By bringing together only a part of the staff of the season that it tried to emulate, and due to the pressure of being this big 10th anniversary blowout, probably, the Happiness Charge stumbled at the start and struggled to pick itself back up. It did eventually pick up steam and come into its own, but not before significant damage was already done. From the shallow characters to the unfocused story and drop plot lines. Oh hell, I haven't even mentioned the most egregious of those. Let's do just that. The two weirdest, dropped, or incomplete feeling story elements from this season both have to do with love. Ironic that love is meant to be so thematically important to the extent that Megumi's cure form is named for it, yet this season struggled to follow through with any of its messaging about love. We'll focus on the less bad part first. God's love. Oh yeah, one of the primary supporting cast members is literally just a god. His name's Blue, gee, I wonder why, and he's responsible for giving the girls their Precure powers. Only thing is, he's got one rule that the girls absolutely must follow. They must not fall in love. Yeah, come on, they're teenagers, good luck with that, buddy. So that's a strange rule, right? Makes you wonder what's going on with God there. Why'd he make that rule? Does he think humans can just turn off their base desires like a light switch? If not, how does he expect to enforce it? These questions and more you won't get the answers to, because this too is a dropped story thread. Well, not wholly dropped, just partly. At least the first question there gets an answer, but that answer is only implied, and therein lies the problem. This season fails to bring this thread full circle, to explicitly return to it during events in which it would be most relevant. Those events, though, require some context. So it turns out that God here sort of created Mirage, the big bad for most of the season. She used to be a normal girl, then she got Precure powers from Blue, then they hung out a lot and their hearts went all doki doki, but then God was like, nah, I can't fall in love with a human, for I am a god and must love all equally, and then ghosted her like an absolute asshat. So Mirage gets corrupted, and hundreds of years later the show happens, and Blue has to accept his feelings for her in order for the day to be saved. Given all of that, you can intuit the answer to that first question, right? Blue imposed that rule to prevent another Mirage situation from happening. Here's the problem, though. They never say that. To my recollection, that rule is never brought up in tandem with Mirage or her and Blue's relationship or anything. It seems like an obvious connection, but the show never makes it. Instead, the rule is just brought up a few times on its own apropos of nothing, and then the finale happens with no mention of it. It's so obvious that this is what should have happened that it makes me wonder if I just fell asleep at some point and missed the part where they said, oh, God made that rule up because of what he did to Mirage. Asshole. It would have been... Sorry. It would have been so easy to add just a simple line like that to pay off this narrative thread, but they didn't. It's a setup without a payoff, a lack of a satisfactory conclusion to a thread built up as important over a long period of time. It's It's just weird. But on to the second and more confused of these incomplete love threads. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a love triangle.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, do not panic. This is not a Macross situation. Repeat, this is not a Macross.
Oh. Well, that's alright then. That is to say, this isn't a love triangle where the frustration stems from the characters. Oh no, this ain't no Macross where a guy can treat two women like crap and still end up in the arms of the more caring soul. You deserved so much better, Misa! Dump the bastard, please! Yeah, sorry. I watched Macross recently. I just needed to get that off my chest. The movie was really pretty, but man, fuck Hikaru. No, this love triangle actually facilitates some not unbearable drama. The frustration mostly stems from the status of the primary relationship being left far too ambiguous at the end. That relationship being the one between Megumi and her childhood friend Seiji. And to be fair, calling this a love triangle may be a bit misleading because once you've got all the characters lined up, it's more like a big web of unrequited madness. Let's try to outline it. For fun. With Megumi and Seiji as the main thing here, which we'll return to later, we've got a lot of complicating factors to add on. The first of those factors is God, whom Megumi crushes on, but he ain't ever gonna love her because he's only got eyes for Mirage, so that's hopeless. And then the crush doesn't escape Seiji's notice, who gets jealous of God and his godliness and stealing Megumi's attention. But wait, then we've got Hime, who in episode 26 realizes she just got the hots for Seiji, and in the very next episode thinks this. But she ends up never doing anything about it. Also, in episode 25, there's this one rando girl who's also crushing on Seiji, but he shuts her down, like, immediately. Very sad. And then there's Yuko, who does nothing and is wholly irrelevant.
Got him!
A whole lot of love troubles that make for many good and bad times, but in the last few episodes when all's said and done, what it primarily boils down to is Megumi and Seiji. Their relationship is fairly ambiguous throughout pretty much the whole season. At first, they're confident that they're just platonic besties, which frankly I would have been more than happy with if they just stuck with that, but whatever. Then those pesky feelings start to happen, and toward the end they got to go do the thing where they yell about their feelings and do a sympho gear. Seriously, the resemblance there is uncanny. Seiji's jealousy gets him brainwashed by the real big bad, and he and Megumi duke it out, and the fight ends when she goes for the mega hug and gives a big speech about how much she appreciates all the little love he's given her because she's always thought of him as a brother, and then that's it? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Crucially, Megumi never says anything to the effect of, I love you, and the status of their relationship is left unclear to the end. Are they still just friends? Are they going out? What's going on? The relationship between these two has been the emotional core of the season, and you're not gonna bother giving it a proper ending? You're dangling right on the edge of a resolution. Please, just take one more step. That's all you need to do. Just have them say, I love you. For fuck's sake, just kiss already. Fuck. The one love-related topic this season managed to see through to the end was reaffirming the value of love in the face of loss. The true big bad, Red, is overwhelmed by his losses and thinks love can only lead to misery. Because everyone eventually dies, all love must lead to heartbreak. Essentially, the struggle here is love versus nihilism, and this being Precure, the conclusion is of course that love is stronger. Loss may hurt, but a life without either is empty. Better to have loved and lost. I feel like I've said this before. So yeah, standard fare for Precure this bit, but at least it's consistent. Oh man, I've been really down on this season, haven't I? There were things I liked, too. What world building this season dabbled in was more conceptually exciting than is the norm. This time around, Precure are a known force in the world, which we learn about when Megumi's all like, not only that, but there are Precure all around the world. Baby, we've gone international. Even better, we occasionally even get to actually see those international Precure. So that's fun. I say conceptually interesting because this new setup opens up a whole lot of storytelling opportunities that this season just didn't take advantage of. Fuck. I've gone critical again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's cool. The setup is cool. So, yeah, I think I'm done. That's all I can manage. This season, It was something in the end, but just barely. It struggled to come into its own for so long that by the time it did, it was too hard to care. I appreciated the spectacle, but I'd be hard-pressed to say that that alone was enough to overcome the surprisingly dull cast and confused structure. It looked pretty, occasionally stellar, but that was about it. With apologies to the creative team, I'm going to have to give this one a big shrug. Thanks for sitting through my rambling about a children's magical cartoon show. Next up is Go Princess, which everyone tells me is the other universally loved season up there with Heartcatch, so that's exciting. Not going to get to it for a while though, because I've got a viewer's choice video to make. Speaking of, you all should watch my latest one. It's about Alien 9, and it's one of my better videos if I do say so myself. Maybe stick around for more of those viewer choice videos, I don't know, hit that bell or something. Oh jeez, I just did self-promotion. Oh jeez, I'm sick. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that again. Okay, anyway, that's it for me. Thanks again for watching. Be gay, do crime.